Today I thought I would do a video on scenery, in particular how to make sidewalks. These past couple weeks I've been busy working on scenery on the Peabody Merrimack Valley layout, so it's been hard for me to focus on making videos for this channel. The last several months I've been very busy making videos for this channel, so I've neglected working on the layout. I'm excited with the progress that I've made, and hopefully soon we'll be doing an episode 14 showing you guys the progress that I've made. Now let's get on to the topic, sidewalks. I'm not an expert in doing scenery for model railroads. In fact, I consider myself a beginner. But when I come across what I feel is a good way to do something to your model railroad, I like to share that with you guys. Most of my buildings for my downtown area are going to consist of Woodland Scenics buildings. They're a little expensive, but I love them. I love the level of details that they offer, and I really love their just plug lighting system. I knew I wanted sidewalks in my downtown area, but I didn't know how to incorporate them with my buildings. I got the idea from my friends over at Facebook groups to use masonite for the sidewalk. I also use masonite for the streets. The lower level would be for the street, and the second level would be for the sidewalk, and what the buildings would sit on directly. The masonite that I'm using is 1/4 inch in thickness, which I think is prototypical for curb height in O scale. There's a guy on YouTube, and his channel name is Just for the Fun of It. I like the way he did his sidewalks, so I'm using his way of doing sidewalks, but also incorporating some of my own ideas. For demonstration purposes, I thought I would use this little strip of masonite for my next sidewalk. Down here in the foreground, I'm going to be having a small park with a gazebo, and I wanted to have a sidewalk on both sides of the street. So what I've done is I've cut this piece of masonite out, and it is ready to be worked on to be made into a sidewalk. So let's go do that. The materials that we'll need for this project is, of course, the masonite. That's what we'll be working on. The joint compound, the blade that you use to spread the joint compound onto the masonite, the sandpaper to smooth it out after it's dry. This, believe it or not, this little nail is what we'll be using to etch the joints into the sidewalk, the joint lines. For a paint, I use Woodland Scenics top coat from their Pave It system. It's called top coat, and it's the color of concrete. This is a right angle, and back here is a straight edge. So the first thing we do is we apply the joint compound onto the masonite, and it gives the paint something to adhere to. It also allows you to etch the joints into a sidewalk. If you see a real sidewalk, you can see the joints. And the sidewalks that I make are 1.5 inches wide, which simulates a 6-foot wide sidewalk. So this has been measured to 1.5 inches. So I take the joint compound and I just start to smear it on. And you want to apply not too much of a coat, but you want to apply a thick enough coat that you can etch a deep enough joint into the joint compound, the joint lines, because you want the joint lines to be deep enough, because what we'll eventually do is I will use a black wash, and the black wash will go into those joint lines and kind of highlight them. And so you want the joint lines to be deep enough to enable the black wash to go into them. But you don't want it to be too thick. You want the joint lines to be, scale. You don't want them to be, huge craters. So I'll go ahead and apply this coat of joint compound, and I'll be right back. So now the joint compound is dry. I had a tough time getting an even coat on this masonite because it was so small, and masonite is so flexible. So what I'll do is I'll sand this down, make it nice and even, nice and smooth. I'm using the 320 extra fine grit sandpaper, and when you sand it, you don't want to push real hard because you don't want to sand the joint compound off of the masonite. You just want to do a light back and forth until you get it smooth. So I'll go ahead and do that and be back. Okay, now this is has been sanded down smooth. And the next thing we want to do is we want to create, before we do the joint lines, we want to make the curbing. And we're just going to take one long line along the edge. It'll be on this side over here. And we'll make an edge for the curbing. And this is where the straight edge comes in. Basically what I do is I take my nail, I figure out where exactly I want the curbing to be. And again, it's a matter of preference. And then you just etch a line in you press the nail against the side of the straight edge. Make sure that it's equidistant from one end to the other so that you get a perfect line. You want your curbing to be even. And then you just scratch a line along the edge. Oops. You want to make sure your straight edge doesn't move as you're scratching. And then I usually like to go a second time with the nail just to really get it in there. And then you have your curbing. Now the next step is to measure the. I like to make tick marks for the where I'm going to mark the joint lines, and so I take a tape measure and I make the joint lines an inch apart from each other. So I'm just going to go ahead and measure out make tick marks, and I'll be right back. So as you can see, I've created little tick marks where I'm going to etch the lines for the joints. They're at 1 inch intervals. And when you etch the line, you don't want to go past the curb. So you want the line to go right up against the line that we etched for the curbing, but not to the very edge of the masonite. And this is where the right angle comes in. This is how you get a perfect 90-degree line. And you just basically line this up and you scratch with the nail. Usually I like to do it like twice. to make sure I get a deep line. And I have this clamped down because this is a small piece of masonite and I don't want it to move while I'm pushing the 90 degree, the right angle against against the masonite. Okay, I gotta move this out of the way. I start at the previous line we made for the curbing, and I just scratch up. Make sure that that nail head, the nail tip goes right where the line, where the tick mark is. And see, you can see the lines. So I'll go ahead and do the rest of this, and I'll be right back. So I've etched all the lines into the masonite, and you can see these are the joints. And if there's nicks in the joint compound, like let's see, right here. See, there's a divot in that. That's okay, because no sidewalk is going to be, is going to have imperfections. So what we're going to do now is paint with the top coat. Next comes the top coat. So I just squirt a little bit on and I spread it with the brush. And you don't need a lot. Again, you don't want to have the paint fill in your joint lines. You want to make sure your joint lines are open so that when you do the weathering with the, not the weathering, the, when you do the black wash, you want the wash to go into those crevices. Make sure that the paint is not pooling in those lines you just etched. So I'll go ahead and paint the rest of this and I'll be back. This is all painted now, and you can still see the joint lines. One thing I didn't mention that I need to mention is the curbing on this side that faces the street, the edge right here. You have to paint that too. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry, and we'll give it a, we'll do the black wash. So the top coat from Woodland Scenics is dried, and I am ready to put on the wash. The top coat from the Woodland Scenics is just a little too bright for a sidewalk, and it's a little too crisp. So we gotta dull it down a little bit and make those joints kind of stand out a little bit. So the wash will do that. And the sidewalks that I showed you in the beginning of the video, I actually ended up doing 4 coats of the wash. It just depends on how strong the wash is, and it depends on how dark you want the sidewalks to look. It's all just a matter of preference. So all you do is just take the wash and throw it on there. Yeah, this is pretty dark. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the sidewalk. Okay, so I've let this dry, and when it dried, I wasn't too happy with the color. It was uneven, so I had to play with it a little bit. I had to play with some more of the wash and try to blend it in. It's still not perfect, but it's dry here. The color is a little bit different than the color of the curbing here. I don't know if I used a stronger wash, but this is the result. So if you're interested in working on sidewalks and need some ideas, hopefully this video has helped. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, stay safe and take care.